On today's episode of Locked On Wilds, the Wild hit the Olympic break on a high. We recap the first 58 games of the season, plus which nations could spoil the party for Team USA and Canada in the Olympics.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
Hey, this is Marcus Foligno, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Seth Toupal. Welcome to Locked On Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Locked On Wild is your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on all of your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We have new episodes for you every Monday through Friday. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we recap the first 58 games of the season and a surge for the Wild since November 1st that has them at the top of the NHL as far as points and other categories go. We'll also dive into the Olympics with a primer with Parker McLean of On the Fly, and we'll take a look at which Minnesota Wild players will factor in most to the Olympic Games this year. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, credentialed media member, bringing you insider access beyond the box score with interviews and deep dives. And the Wilds got it done with a very fun, high-event hockey game last night as they beat the Nashville Predators 6-5. And you can hear a full breakdown of the game in our postcast from last night. And the Wilds go into the break with a 34-win mark. And they really playing their best hockey at the right time. They're 34-14-10, but the Wild are 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. So they went in on a 5-game winning streak, 8-1-1 in the final 10 games before the Olympic break. And if you want to boil it even further than that, we know November 1st is kind of the magic number for this Minnesota Wild team. Since November 1st, 31-8-7. 31-8-7 for the Minnesota Wild in that span. And they are averaging 3.5 goals per game in that span. They've scored 161 goals. They've given up just 119. So it's not only that that they're scoring a bunch of goals, which is not something we're used to seeing from this franchise, but they're finding ways to get wins. And whether it takes overtime or a shootout, the Wild are finding ways to rally in the third, to get games to overtime, and finding ways to get it done in the extra session. The most points in the league. Now, the games played are all over the place. Colorado has only played 43 games, for example. The Carolina Hurricanes have played 47. The Minnesota Wild, since November 1st, have the most points in the NHL at 69. As far as the goals go, second in the league behind the Colorado Avalanche. With 161, the Avs have 166. Now, in that same span, the Wild are 10th in the league in power play percentage since November 1st at 24.1%, but we'll talk about that more here in a second. And as far as the penalty kill is concerned, the Wild are a respectable 12th in the league in penalty kill since November 1st. 80.6%. First time we've been able to say that about the Minnesota Wild for a minute. So the Wilds had a great month of November, and that was off of a pretty lousy October. But they rallied, they regrouped, and they have kicked a couple of things into high gear since. Enter Quinn Hughes, who was acquired by the Wild in mid-December. He made his debut for the Wild on December 14th. And in that span, the Minnesota Wild are 16-5-5 in the 26 games that Quinn Hughes has played. 16-5-5. So they are getting points at a 71% clip. The 16 wins is tied for third best amongst all teams in that span. The 37 points is tied with the Tampa Bay Lightning for second most in the league. The Buffalo Sabres have 40 in their last 25 games. Great. Good for them. But the thing that has, I think, defined since Quinn Hughes got here is how the rest of the Central Division is done in that same span. And again, the games played are all over the place. But with the Wild having 37 points, the Dallas Stars in that span have 30 points, as do the Colorado Avalanche. So the Wild have found a way to gain 7 points in the standings on both. And for a while, it looked like the Wild were going to be distant third, but they have started to pull their way back in to the standings. And it's looking now like it's going to be a fight all the way through to the end for at least second place. Games in hand for Colorado, though. And Dallas, I think, had a couple of games in hand. But the main point is that the Wild's 16-5-5 in the amount of time that they've had Quinn Hughes. And the mark of the team, the makeup of the team has shifted. The Wild in those 26 games are averaging 3.92 goals per game, which is the highest in the league. They are the only team since December 14th that has scored 100-plus goals. I will also stress there are games going on right now, but as of all of the games last night, the Minnesota Wild were the only team in the NHL that had 100-plus goals since December 14th. Montreal is second with 98, Buffalo with 97. The Wild are plus 20 in the goals department in those 26 games. And yes, goals against is at 3.15, which is tied for 17th with the Ottawa Senators in that span as far as fewest goals allowed. But here's the other number that is very impressive for the Minnesota Wild in that same 26-game span. The Wild power play is at 30.4% in that 26-game span. And those are the two areas that the Wild's needed help, was the offense and the power play in particular. And Quinn Hughes came in and he said, no problem. We'll add some things to that and make them not only workable, but we'll put them into upper echelon numbers. And those two stretches have the Wild third in the league in points, tied with the Carolina Hurricanes as far as points go with 78. As far as goals scored, the Wild are sixth in the league in goals scored. Their goals for of 3.31 is 11th. But that's the highest mark that I have seen for the last since 2021, 2022. On the power play, the Wild are fifth in the league. That is the highest mark that the Wild have had in quite some time. As far as the penalty kill goes, the Wild are at 24th, but 77.2%. It's not as drastic of a weakness as it was before this season. And so you're seeing the signs that this Wild team is up there as far as the best teams in the league go. And we're getting to the point now that the October portion of the schedule looks like a blip, because now the Wild have done this for 46 games out of possible 58. So the age-old debate as to, is it the start or is it the finish? Are the Wild as good as they're playing? Are they the team that started the season off 3-6-3? And we have the numbers to suggest that the Wild are much closer to the team that we've seen for 46 games, to that being just what they are. They are a high-flying offense. They're I like to call it a lightning strike offense, predicated on stretch passing, odd man rushes, breakouts, quick hits, much like a lightning strike. But that has proven beneficial because there's no deficit that is off limits. The Wilds rallied from 3 goals down in the third period in a game earlier this year. First time they'd done that in a while. It is a team that is capable of mounting any deficit. And as a result, they are one of the best teams in the league and look like they are poised to take that onto a deep run once the season resumes on February 26th. So as far as things go for the Wild, hitting the break on a high, Jonas Brodin, the only injury that this team is dealing with right now. And so vibes are high, expectations are high, and really, truly excited to see what this team is going to do out of the break after some quality Olympic competition. Now, we will, of course, keep you up to date on the Olympics while they are in progress. Parker McLean of On the Fly going to join us after the break to just take a look at the teams that we expect to be at the top and which teams could potentially ruin the party for Team USA and Team Canada. We will discuss all of that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper, but just wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. Welcome back to today's edition of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure if you have not already that you hit that like button and you subscribe on YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms, so you don't miss out, especially during the Olympics, because even though the Wild and the rest of the NHL are on a break here for the next 2.5 weeks, the Olympics are getting going immediately. And here to help us break things down is Parker McLean of On the Fly. Parker reached out and is going to provide us some Olympic coverage here, which is awesome. Parker, thank you so much for joining the show, and great to have you on, and really excited to get going for the Olympics.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Olympics are right around the corner. Women's stuff started just today, so now it's right into the swing of things.
Yeah, and it's pretty much hit the ground running. I know the men's teams will have a few days to kind of get acclimated, but competition's going to get started here in earnest, which we'll talk about. But just to kind of paint a broad brush of the Olympic competition, as many would expect, Team USA, Team Canada, they are kind of the heavyweight favorites here in this matchup. So let's talk Team Canada first. Obviously, star-studded roster. What is the difference maker for Canada, or who is the difference maker for Canada that will lead to them hoisting the gold medal here once all is said and done?
Yeah, for sure. And I think as much as you look at what's the difference maker for Canada, it's how are they going to beat the US at the end of this tournament. And for me, it ultimately comes down to defense. It's the reason why they ended up winning 4 nations, because at the end of the day, the US is the offense, Canada is the defense. And so whichever way you look at it, you can look at their defense, you can look at their offense. Everyone on that team serves a specific role for this Canadian team in particular. You can look to that top 6 as more of a two-way, but with that offensive punch, versus the bottom 6, which is going to be much more of the defense first-minded players. And we saw that even with today's moves, where, of course, Braden Point just got deemed out for the Olympics, replaced by Seth Jarvis. Many people I know were hoping it'd be a Connor Bedard reunion, but not quite going to be the case, because at the end of the day, it boils down to defense for this Canadian team if they want any shot at beating or even upsetting, I guess, if you want to go that far, this U.S. team this year.
Are you surprised at all? I know we still have a little bit before the actual lineups are announced. Are you surprised that it seems as though Team Canada is shifting towards Jordan Binnington as the starter? Do you expect that we may see other guys get in? Obviously, Binnington hasn't had the greatest year, but you think about all of the different high levels of competition he's been in. The Four Nations face-off, he outdueled Connor Hellebuyck to end up winning it. So while his year in the NHL hasn't been great, can he still find that next gear to lead Canada this year?
I'd say absolutely. And you talk about big-time Binnington, and he's going to be exactly that for Canada this year, assuming he gets the opportunity. And you can look at it any which way. At the end of the day, it comes down to how does he play in the pre-tournament, and especially in the prelims, because if he stinks the bed, he'll be replaced by likely Logan Thompson. And that's what it's going to come down to. And I think you can look back at previous tournaments as well, whether it's 2010, 2014, the goaltender that started for Canada didn't ultimately finish the tournament for Canada. So as much as Jordan Binnington is going to be the initial starter, and most likely, obviously that hasn't been confirmed as of this current moment, but it's certainly trending that way, it wouldn't surprise me to see them make the switch if Binnington continues his poor performance like he has so far this season.
Let's shift our focus to Team USA a little bit. And again, Parker McLean of On the Fly joining us here today to talk some Olympics. Obviously, some big names left off the United States roster in Cole Caulfield and Jason Robertson. Were you surprised that two pretty high caliber goal scorers were left off, or was this just kind of looking at what sort of a player Bill Guerin was in his day? Was this an expected move to fill that roster with a little more grit, a little more physicality to try to combat Canada?
Well, I think the bigger question, the more important question, is why did the U.S. not win at Four Nations? And you can look at it in the game against Canada, but what a lot of people forget is they also lost to Sweden in that somewhat meaningless game that at the end of the day also did mean something, especially for the Swedish team, who had one of the worst tournaments of, I'd say, any of the teams there, where they had 2 overtime losses and a win, and they still didn't make it to the finals. And so I think it's less about how are they going to beat Canada, but more so how are they going to get to that gold medal game? Because an early look, you can assume that, the U.S. is likely going to win their group in high margin. They should end up placing as the top spot in terms of the grand seeding. And then second and third belong to the other 2 group winners, likely Canada. It could be the Czechs, could be the Swiss. And in Group B, you're likely going to see Sweden or Finland. And so what that means is you got to look to who's that eventual semifinal matchup. And because it's going to be whoever that 4th seed is, it's likely going to be either the Czechs or Finland, Sweden. And so you're going to need a good defensive team or have good defensive pieces that when you get attacked by a good Swedish or Czech or Swiss, for that matter, offense, you're going to be able to shut them down, especially when you go up in games. Because if you try scoring mano a mano, they're going to pick you apart because they're designed to beat offensive systems, because that's how they're built, and that's the way that they've played hockey. It's why they're still competitive to this day, or any tournament, whether it's the juniors, the world championships. They're always competitive because they play within their system. And for the U.S., that's the system that those teams are designed to beat.
Parker, assuming that it plays out the way that we expect and that the U.S. and Canada are going to be in it all the way to the end, which teams stand the best chance to throw a wrench into the plans to knock either Canada or the U.S. out and pull some major upsets?
I'd say realistically, you're looking at Sweden in particular. Like at the grand scheme of it, for 1 and 2, Canada, US, you can pick either team to be the number 1. Third place standalone is the Swedes, although they have injury problems, so that will become more apparent as this tournament moves onward. Finland, I'd say, is a pretty confident 4th, separated from the Swedes, and then 5th and 6th is likely the Czechs and the Swiss, and then there's a pretty big drop from that Swiss team in place number 6. And I think any team above that can throw a wrench into the standings at any point, whether it be the Czechs and the Swiss upsetting Canada early on in the tournament, which I am very scared as a Canadian fan going into the opening day against the Czechs, because that's a team that's sitting in the weeds waiting to surprise some folks. They won the World Championships 2 years ago. They've been a competitive team at these tournaments for years, and they play a very tough system for North American teams to get through. If they can play that system, especially with their European talent, it's going to be difficult for teams like Canada to get through that. Same thing with the US if they meet them in the quarters, semis onwards. And then the Finns, I'd say, is the other one who's always a tough out at these tournaments, outside of the obvious Sweden, who I'd say should be right up there with the gold medal favorites.
Let's talk a little bit about the women's side of things here too, just to close, as they obviously have started competition, and Team USA started their play with a win. Same story on the women's side. U.S. and Canada going to be going toe-to-toe, or can someone else, one of the other nations, throw a little bit of a spoiler to ruin their party?
Yeah, I'd say this year more than ever is the most competitive Olympics we're going to see. And whether you look at the men's side or the women's side, on the women's side this year, you have the rise of the Czechs, who have been kind of growing steadily since the last Olympics. They finished 7th in that tournament. We're kind of got screwed over by the fact that it's the staggered groups on the women's side. This is the last year of it. They'll be shifting away for the next Women's Worlds and Olympics onwards. But the reason why you have to avoid being in the bottom 7 teams, 7, 8, 9, 7 and 8, is you end up playing Canada or the US in that quarterfinal. And so what it means that you're not going to have an easy matchup in the quarters. This year, the Czechs are in the top group. They've been growing consistently inside the Women's Worlds. They nearly beat the US last year with the majority of the similar team they're bringing in now. Yes, they lost today 5-1 the final, but realistically, this Czech team, very similar to the way that the Swedes, the Finns, and even the Czechs on the men's side are waiting to try and upset teams like Canada and the US. This Czech team on the women's side is one that is going to surprise, I'd say, Canada and the US at this year's tournament. Just with the way that they play, it's always dangerous whenever they take the ice.
Just looking at the schedule here a little bit, as we mentioned, the women's side has already gotten underway, and they will continue competition here. The men really pick things up in earnest on the 11th, is when things really get going, and then they'll push all the way through to the medal games, which for the women are going to be on February 19th. And for the men, it will be on the 21st and the 22nd. So it's going to be a mad dash between now and then. Parker, we appreciate having you on here just to kind of just give us a nice little primer for the Olympics. Before we go, though, make sure let the listeners know where they can follow you. We will definitely have you back on here throughout the competition to talk about the results. But just let everybody know where they can follow you throughout the course of the Olympics here for more breakdown.
For sure. You can find me on YouTube, which is where we do our majority of our content, as well as TikTok, Instagram, X. All of those links are at On The Fly 1515. And that's where you can find me. We cover all things international hockey, from the men's worlds, the women's world, of course, these Olympic tournaments, the World Juniors, and both women's and men's U18 tournaments.
Locked On Wild listeners, make sure to give Parker a follow, and we'll finish today's episode right after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. And once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, if you have not already, make sure that you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We will have you covered even through the Olympics. We're not taking any sort of a break. The beat goes on, and we will continue to bring you coverage of the games. We'll have plenty of breakdown for everything going on over the next couple of weeks, as well as kind of perspective type things for the Minnesota Wild. We will look back at what we've seen so far this year, and kind of what we have to look forward to as the rest of the season rolls along. So I wanted to finish today's show by just looking at the breakdown of Minnesota Wild players on the Olympic rosters, because we have there are several players that will be making an impact on the Wild, or on the Olympics this year from a Wild perspective. And so starting with Team USA, obviously the big three: Matt Boldy, Quinn Hughes, Brock Faber. And as far as importance, these three are going to be critical pieces for the success of Team USA in the Olympics. Matt Boldy, if we go back to the Four Nations face-off, Matt Boldy was the leading point getter for the entire tournament and routinely found his way into a top six role on Team USA, and was by and large one of the best players of the tournament. And I think if he can take what he has done so far this year, which is tied for third in the NHL in goals, and a player who just continues to ascend in what he has done and what he continues to do for the Minnesota Wild, he could be a crucial piece for the Wild and for Team USA in the Olympics and the quest to capture the gold medal. But he is part of an offense that features the likes of Tage Thompson, Brady and Matthew Tkachuk, Jack Hughes, who is injured though, so he probably will not. He probably won't factor into as much of the play. Jake Gensel, Jack Eichel, Kyle Connor, Dylan Larkin, who was a big standout in the Four Nations face-off. Boldy has a chance to be, a centerpiece for the Minnesota Wild in the Olympics as far as the Team USA production goes. On the defensive side, you could be looking at the top pairing for Team USA. Last year, Brock Faber and Jacob Slavin became kind of the shutdown pairing in the Four Nations face-off. I would imagine Bill Guerin will opt to keep Faber and Hughes together through the Olympics. That's going to depend on kind of what the coaching staff sees, but I would imagine Bill Guerin will heavily suggest that Faber and Hughes stick together, considering what they have done and what they can bring. But you also have the likes of Zach Werenski, Jake Sanderson, Noah Hannafin, Jackson Lacombe, Charlie McAvoy. You've got some real good pieces defensively for Team USA. And it is going to be one of the best rosters in the entire tournament. They are expected to be gold medal winners. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of how this plays out and what the coaching staff does, how the Minnesota Wild players are deployed for Team USA, because like I said, Those three are going to be pivotal to the success of Team USA in trying to capture the gold medal. Now, the next, and this is where most of the representation comes from for the Minnesota Wild. I'm, of course, talking about Team Sweden. It is a large portion of Minnesota Wild players, but one less than previously due to an injury for Jonas Brodin. He had surgery and will not be part. He was initially named to the team, but will not be participating in the Olympics to heal from the surgery. The representatives of Team Sweden for Minnesota, Marcus Johansson, Joel-Eriksson Ek, Filip Gustavsson, and Jesper Wallstedt is the goalie tandem. And so looking at Team Sweden and what sort of impact can we expect from the Minnesota Wild contingent, I would imagine that Joel-Eriksson Ek will be a top 6 center for the Swedish team. Marcus Johansson may play lower in the lineup and probably will play lower in the lineup just because of the names that you bring to the table. Jesper Bratt, Philip Forsberg, Gabe Landeskog, William Nylander, Elias Pettersson. And so it may even be that Joel-Eriksson Ek gets put into more of a bottom 6 role. But those two, him and Johansson, they will play. They will play. They've had good enough seasons to where they will certainly factor in. You're looking at likely the starter in net for Team Sweden and Filip Gustavsson, who's been on he was just on an absolute heater to finish off the pre-Olympic break schedule. I believe he was 13-5-2 in his last 20 starts before the or actually it was in his last 18 starts. He was 13-3-2 before the Olympic break. So Gus should be the starter. Markstrom obviously in there as a backup, and Jesper as a backup as well. But Gus should get the workload as far as the starting goaltender goes. So there's going to be a heavy influence for the Minnesota Wild as far as Sweden is concerned. There is one representative of the Minnesota Wild on Team Germany. That is Nico Sturm. So I would imagine Sturm will be a bottom 6 center for the Team Germany. You've got Leon Draisaitl. You've got Tim Stützle. You've got Nico Sturm. You've got JJ Peterka on the team as far as NHLers go. So you never know. Maybe he does play a little higher up in the lineup, but he certainly will factor in as far as the action goes. So just another opportunity for the Minnesota Wild to make their presence known. And then from Team Czechia, David Spacek was named to the Team Czechia roster. So he will factor in, you would imagine, maybe as a third pairing defenseman for Team Czechia. And just a great honor for Spacek to get into the Olympic conversation. And as far as the rest of the representation goes, just one other player that was named to the roster from the Minnesota Wild organization, and that was to Team Slovakia, and that would be none other than Samuel Levi, who is in the Minnesota Wild organization. He's kind of bounced between Iowa and the Heartlanders as well, but the Leviathan, as I call him, I'm hoping that nickname finds a way to stick because it's outstanding. He will factor in a little bit. I would imagine he'll be more of a backup for Slovakia, but he played well in the Four Nations face-off, and they could elect to just have him kind of run with it in net for the Olympics once they get going. We'll have full coverage of all of the Minnesota Wild players involved, as well as the games at large. But again, men's hockey gets going in earnest next week. on February 11th. So stay tuned there. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We are going to do what I like to call player check-ins over the next 2.5 weeks. Just see where we are at with everybody on the roster. You know, what were the expectations coming in? Are they exceeding? Are they matching? Are they underperforming? We'll take a look at all of those. And it's going to be a very MVP edition coming up for you tomorrow because we're going to start right at the top. Kaprizov, Quinn Hughes, Matt Boldy. We're going to do these just in segments. So it's going to be 3 per. So we're not super like dwelling on these. Just want to check in and see where everybody's at. So that starts tomorrow. And of course, we'll keep you up to date on the Olympics as well. Make sure to like and subscribe if you have not already so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.